Rihanna Kemplin, Jariah Edwards, Riley Montgomery, 17, 16 years old. These are teenage girls from here in the Valley who right now should be enjoying their summer break. Instead, each of these girls murdered by men who were supposed to love them. Boyfriends caught in relationships that ultimately ended in death. And these murders, they all happened in just the last couple of months. And as parents, as friends, as neighbors, what is going on in these teenage relationships? And how do we spot trouble before it goes too far? That's right now on MOMCAST. Welcome to MOMCAST. I'm Emma Jade. Your kids, your teenagers, they're probably prepping right now to head back to school. Meet up with old friends, old flames, new ones. It's an exciting time, but the relationships they build right now can have lasting effects on who they become. Tragically, we've had multiple cases of teen relationships that have ended in violence and in some, murder. I spoke to a woman, a leader in our community, who helps teenagers and their families in these situations. Abuse in young relationships, more prevalent than you might think. And there are red flags that we should all be on the lookout for. Here's MOMCAST with Donna Bartos from Bloom 365. We've had a handful of pregnant teenagers shot by either boyfriends or ex-boyfriends. And us as parents are looking at this like, what is going on, Donna? What's happening?
Well, these issues have been happening for decades, but we're seeing an elevation of the lethal violence with teen violence and domestic violence overall. And we have domestic violence cases happening too. I think the shocker is, wait a second, this happens to teens as well. This is not just an adult problem. And so when we think about the recent cases and the awareness is heightened that the victims were pregnant, pregnancy across the board with domestic violence, if there is abuse or violence in that relationship, elevates potential lethality for a pregnant woman, no matter what her age is. And there's a lot of dynamics here that we really need to do a better job educating the public on, that domestic violence, dating abuse is about two things: power and control. And when someone feels like that they're going to lose that power and control, or they feel so powerless, and in these cases, there's a baby coming. You know, I don't know the victims. I don't know the backstory, but I do know the data and the research that says across the board, if there's domestic violence or abuse in that relationship and the woman is pregnant, her chances of elevated abuse and potential lethality increase exponentially, because now, number one, the attention is no longer on the father. The attention is now on this baby, whether born or unborn. There might be an added level of stress, financial stress, which deeply dives into that root of insecurity. How am I going to do this? What did I do? Or there could be another layer where, you know, when you're pregnant, you are not fulfilling the needs often, or the desires of your partner, and you're putting up boundaries because your body is telling you, like, no, like I am focused on me right now. And no matter what the situation is, this always comes back to that feeling of powerlessness on the part of the abuser. And then when they can't take it, when they don't have coping skills, when they don't have people holding them accountable, when they don't think they're going to get in trouble, or when they just don't care anymore, sometimes the outcomes are lethal.
It's just so shocking, especially, you know, as a newscaster, we deal with really horrific stories on a daily basis, which is unfortunate. But then when you get the teenager aspect, these are
Yeah.
young kids who are in these relationships that are just not right, you know, and that's what really inspired you to start your nonprofit that's based here in Phoenix, Bloom 365.
Yeah.
What is Bloom 365? What do you guys do?
Bloom 365 is a nonprofit started in Phoenix. We do our work globally now. Our focus is to prevent and respond to dating abuse, domestic violence, and sexual assault, focusing on specifically 11 to 24-year-olds. So in the prevention realm, our focus really is education, Not just education on, are you a victim? If so, get help, because that's been the narrative for decades and it's gotten us nowhere when we're putting the responsibility of ending these harms on the
Yes.
shoulders of those who are experiencing it.
Yep.
So our education is much different. We focus on educating young people on, okay, here are the signs, but are you doing this? And are you at risk for doing this? Here's the science-backed information that says these are the things in your life that you have or don't have that will put you at risk, more risk for harming others. And if so, there's a path for you to not choose violence or to not offend again. So our organization provides that level of education that then leads to a few other programs and services that we've developed over the years that are informed by teens, are guided by teens, are specifically for teens and relevant to teens, because we recognize that majority of teens who experience victimization and those who are perpetrating do not seek help. Only about 9% do. So to remove those barriers, we now offer licensed counseling for those who've experienced and wraparound services for the non-offending parents so that they know how to support their young person who's been victimized, whether it's dating abuse, domestic violence, sexual assault, or other forms of violence. Advocacy services that are more crisis related, safety planning, order of protection information, just emotional support, validating a support that they know that this is not their fault, encouraging them to connect, encouraging them to report, encouraging them to seek other trusted adults in their lives. And then the other piece of that work, really, that is unique to us is twofold. We have peer support specialists, young people ages 16 to 24, who have lived experience with this, who go through intensive training, and they hold peer support groups so that they can be in a space with like-minded young people who understand each other to provide that support. And the program that I am most hopeful about and excited about, it's a program that we call Rooted Out, where we're actually delivering interventions in schools to students who have perpetrated violence and wrapping our arms around them early when they're 13, 14, 15 years old and their brains are still developing to prevent them from harming again.
As parents, we want to help, right? We want to step in and we want to save our children. It's complicated in these young relationships. Donna's going to help us navigate that. It's coming up next on MOMCAST.
MOMCAST is sponsored by Moxie Pest Control, protecting what matters most.
I mean, the age range that you guys deal with, all the way down to 11 years old. When a parent hears, some of these horrific stories that are going on, they think, "Oh, my kid will never get into a relationship like that. I won't let that happen." What happens to get it to that point where it's almost as if the parent, there's not much that they can do when it gets to that end?
No, think about your first relationship or think about
Yeah.
every relationships, right? They're not abusive at first. Those red flags aren't there in the beginning.
No.
So you have those butterflies and you have that love and you have that connection. And if you have a vulnerability, whether you're the person who's doing the harm or the person who's experiencing it, that bond and that relationship is going to be a lot stronger, no matter what that vulnerability is. Maybe
Right.
you have a deep insecurity and you feel like no one else is going to like you, and this is the best you're ever going to get.
Yes.
Or maybe this person is a status for you, because you feel pressure to have a partner for prom or HOCO or whatever it is. Or maybe you don't have friends and this person is your BFF and is everything to you. Who knows what those dynamics are? But when we think about, the perception of parents and my kid's not dating, or they won't harm anyone, or they're not talking to me and I don't really know what's going on in the relationship, a lot of this comes down to, well, we have to look at how we're normalizing these behaviors in our community and society and media. But we also have to recognize that there's usually a grooming process. We talk about grooming in the context of adults grooming kids or traffickers grooming victims.
Yep.
But
Yep.
grooming happens in relationships too, where you build trust and you build that connection, and now your hooks are in, and now you've got some level of power and control where you can start testing. And it could come with a verbal jab. It can come with emotional manipulation. If you end the relationship, I'll kill myself. It can elevate to physical harm, physical violence, and sometimes death. And it's those subtle signs that we're not recognizing because they've become so normalized. We see them everywhere. And so this problem is bigger than just victims seek help, parents recognize the signs and help your kids. This has to be a full-on community response, and we're not there yet. And because we're not there yet, and because of the world around us right now feels so unraveled, whether it's online or in person, we've got a powerless generation of young people growing up not knowing how to communicate their feelings and resolve conflicts and cope and have the accountability and responsibility to seek help when they're recognizing that something's not right in them.
So for parents, what is your best advice for people who are just getting started in this space? Maybe their kid is just starting to date,
Yeah.
or maybe they're like, their kids are still young. What's your best advice to make sure that we stay involved and that we raise kids who hopefully don't get into a situation like this?
Yeah. And there's so many layers to that best advice. But number
Yeah.
one, how are you showing up? How are you modeling healthy relationships for them? We are their first teachers.
Right.
How
Right.
are we communicating to the people around us? How do we communicate our emotions? Are we emotionally regulated as adults or not? And if we're not emotionally regulated as adults and we flip out easily, but then we expect them not to have the same responses and behaviors when things don't go their way, there's a disconnect there.
Mhm.
So that's one big place. Another piece of this, we run a training. It's called the Level Response Training. And we have some funding right now. We're able to offer it at no cost in our communities. And what it does is it trains trusted adults, parents and caregivers are included in that, on number one, how to listen to your young person and how to listen to them without the stereotypes that you already have in your brain about them. Right? Teens are
That's so great.
irresponsible, or teens are lazy, or teens are addicted to social media, or teens don't get it, or teens have it so good and I never had it the way. How do we listen without that? How do we listen without bringing our own stuff into that conversation? And how do we truly be there in a way where they recognize that, oh, you are actually listening to me and you're not judging me for what I did or didn't do? And then the second part of that is it comes down to empathy and empathize. Yes, as adults, we have authority and we want to protect our kids and we want them to behave and listen and all the things. And sometimes that empathy thing is void in that authority space. So how do we empathize with them in a way where we recognize, wow, that must be really hard, versus it's not that bad, get over it. Kids in other places have it worse than you. So how do we truly do this empathy thing? How do we validate them for their experiences and let them know what has happened to them? If they have been harmed, it's not their fault. And not responding by, well, you should have just not done that, or you should have just listened. And instead, how do we truly validate what they're going through so that we can build trust and they know that we're a trusted person to come to? And then encouraging them. Are we as parents encouraging them? And as I say in our training, drive their own bus. When they're 14, 15, 16, 17 years old, they're in this funky stage of development where agency and autonomy and teaching them how to do that is so important for empowerment. And what I mean by that, if we're always making their decisions and always driving the bus and telling them, turn left, turn right, back up, go forward, end the relationship, don't see them, you shouldn't wear that to school, we're not giving them that space to build that confidence and that agency, and really recognizing and seeing you as a safe person to go to if they're experiencing this. And then the final piece of that level response is linking them to help and support, knowing that we as parents, some of us are not counselors.
Yep.
Some of us are not PhDs and experts. We try to step into that gap, but having the confidence and knowing that there are resources available for them. Here in Arizona, there's Bloom 365, not being afraid to make that link or to suggest that link to their teen and young person to seek that help and support, whether they're experiencing victimization or they're perpetrating it.
There's a lot of parents have different views on rules for their kids. Do we delay dating to a certain age?
Yeah.
Do we not do boyfriend and girlfriends? What, in your experience, do you think is best practices for parents and for the home?
I think for parents, we need to go back to when we were 14, 15, or 16.
Yeah.
And if our parents told us we couldn't date, would we listen? Or would we climb out the window in the middle of the night?
Exactly, Donna. Exactly, right? So, of course, you're wondering, what are those red flags in these young relationships? Donna has a checklist for us. What do we need to be on the lookout for? That's next, right here on MOMCAST.
MOMCAST is sponsored by Moxie Pest Control, protecting what matters most.
Do we delay dating to a certain age?
Yeah.
Do we not do boyfriend and girlfriends? What, in your experience, do you think is best practices for parents and for the home?
I think for parents, we need to go back to when we were 14, 15, or 16.
Yeah.
And if our parents told us we couldn't date, would we listen? Or would we climb out the window in the middle of the night?
Exactly, Donna. Exactly, right? How do you create a space where you have some rules and some structure, but also honesty?
Yeah, yeah. And this is the nuance of this. And there's so much nuance, and I think this is why we haven't prevented it. There's a nuance of domestic violence. The person who's doing the harm is doing it by taking away someone's voice, agency, autonomy, freedom, etc., through power and control. And if we as parents respond in that same way,
Yes.
you can't do this, you can't do that, what are we doing? We're normalizing that behavior. And some
Right.
parents are like, no, I am the parent. You are the parent. You can give them choices, but you can also help them if they're going to do it anyway, behind your back, without your knowing. Number one, making sure that they know that you are a safe person that they can go to. That's why most teens are not reporting this or going to their parents or adult figures in their lives, because they know they're going to judge them. They're going to lay their opinion on them. They're going to give advice that might be harmful. And they're going to try to nudge them to do what they, want them to do. And as a teen, your brain's still developing. You're in this emotional state. You're not thinking logically, but the adults in your life want you to think logically, but your brain is not ready to think logically. You're all emotion. So how do we make sure that we're leveling with them? It's really, really important. And there are a lot of parents that are completely against that theory, and I get it. But I also get, as a parent, I messed up early on. I have 3 kids. And when I started leveling with my kids, I've got a kid at college who calls me now and tells me stuff. And I'm like, no, I don't want to hear that. Like, why are you saying what? What? But that's the beauty of it. And your parenting doesn't end when they leave the home. Hopefully it just accelerates where they now see you as that trusted person in life. I'm not saying being best friends with them, because there's a role that we have parents have that friends do not have, but being able to be that trusted person. And if we tell them, you can't date, I get it. Okay, well then here's why, and not do it in a way where there's a fear factor there, because if we do that, then they might be afraid to date for the rest of their lives.
Right.
And then they might not be like, I don't even want a relationship now. And then you're like, well, when are you going to get married? When are you going to have kids? But do you remember when I was 15, you scared the heck out of me and told me why I couldn't date? There's so much here. There's so many layers here that we really have to think about.
So you always hear, parents, you should look out for the red flags in whoever, the partner that your child chooses. But like, realistically, what are those red flags? I don't know. I don't know what, like, are there personality traits? What are things that like should give me pause as a parent where I need to at least open up a conversation or a dialogue with my child?
That's a great question. And it's an exhaustive list of subtle things that you might not see and overt red flags. We have red flag checklists on our website at bloom365.org that people can connect with. But it can start with like moving so fast in a relationship. You're dating on day 1, you're in love on day 2, and you're getting married on day 3. Could be a red flag. Telling you what to wear, that's a common one that people hear, but who you can be friends with, who you can't be friends with. Encouraging, your teen, that if their dating partner is encouraging them to no longer play soccer because it's taking away time that they spend together, or encouraging them to leave a friend group because they're not good for them and all you need is me as a friend. Encouraging them to isolate themselves, essentially. There are other red flags, like a little bit more overt, where you can see intimidation happening or threatening happening. The one piece of this that we really overlook is the ability of those who do harm and the ability of those who gain that power and control to gaslight the person that they're with. And what I mean by that is minimizing, when when they do harm, "Oh, it wasn't that bad. It only happened once. I'll never do it again." Or if parents say, or caregivers, even friends or other people in the lives of the person who's being harmed say, "Give them another chance." Even though deep down, a boundary was crossed.
Yep.
That was only one time. So minimizing it, denying that it happened. "Well, we never saw it happen. We never saw them do this to you. They're upstanding in the school community. They're the captain of this team," or their parents are very well known and they would never do that. Denying that that person could ever do it, and then blaming the person. "Well, I told you you couldn't date, right? So what do you expect?" Or, if you just would, spend more time with them, maybe they wouldn't do that. I mean, there's so many different ways that this shows up, not only red flags, but how we contribute to those red flags, how we give power to those red flags in our responses to this.
When parents do step in, oftentimes, and I've seen it with my sisters, I've seen it with nieces, nephews, everything. When we step in and we say too much, it takes our child further away from us and
That's
draws them
right.
closer to that person. Tell me what actually is happening there, and how do I not let that happen to me?
Yeah, well, you level with them to not do it. Like that's where this level comes in. Because what we're doing, if we say to them, "That person, I've seen it coming. I knew they were going to do this to you. You deserve better. They're a piece
Right.
of crap. Why
Yes.
are you staying with them?" Well, we're going to increase that shame and blame and embarrassment and isolation that they're already feeling.
Mm.
And they may never talk to us again. And sometimes the strongest and most courageous thing a survivor can do is stay and try to navigate that. And when they make that choice, we as advocates are there to make sure that we're providing confidential safety planning in the moment. A safety plan is volatile and it's dynamic, to make sure that they have the tools in place to protect themselves if they choose to stay. I'm not advocating for someone to stay with an abusive person forever, but what I'm advocating for is empowerment. Let them drive their own bus, because if we let them drive their own bus and we're that passenger, listening, encouraging, and empathizing with them and validating them and connecting them to resources along the way if they want it, they will find their moment. But if we try to drive that bus, we're going to push them farther away.
You can check out their free services and help that's available by heading to their website. It's bloom365.org. Thank you for watching this very important episode of MOMCAST. I'm Emma Jade. We'll see you next week.
MOMCAST is sponsored by Moxie Pest Control, protecting what matters most.